if you think about a human as like a 2-liter bottle of soda, when they keep everything inside and they get shaken up, it's like their whole system is pressurized and their nervous system is condensing all of this trauma and information deep in their body and their cells in their nervous system. And what it's like when you take a psychedelic that opens neurological pathways that allow for a little bit of a depressurization, right? Like take a little pressure off the system, and it starts to release. That in my understanding is the beginning of a process of purification.
Well, Hunt, welcome to the Wisdom Matrix. We are thrilled to have you here. We've been buddies for a while now, and so excited to introduce you to Travis and Josh. And we are having this conversation, so we're recording on Good Friday, which is very appropriate for the conversation we're about to jump into, which I'm really excited to have with you, and just appreciate the time. And I guess just to and we'll have some information in the show notes and background on you, but maybe just give us the Cliff Notes version of what led you to become a priest, and then a little bit about maybe your experience as a priest, and then we'll kind of jump into some more recent conversations.
Okay, yeah, good, thank you. Yeah, as we were saying, aside the fact that my last name is Priest and my mother's maiden name was Bishop, there actually is a deep spiritual reason for that, and or there's a path. It's not just, hey, that's a good idea. Although I do think there's something interesting about the name thing. So I grew up Christian in a Christian family. We were involved in church. It wasn't part of our life. I grew up in a small town in Kentucky, and my family was involved in church my whole life. I don't ever remember a time that I didn't go to church. I liked church. And it was very open. There's not a lot of judgment in the tradition I was in. It was very open and accepting. And the Episcopal Church is liturgical. It's like the Catholic Church in that way. There's a lot of ritual, and the Eucharist is central. So all those things, as I grew up and was formed as a human being, as a Christian, I'm very grateful for that. And then I went off to college, and then but when I was about 13, our parish priest planted a seed. He said to my aunt, who then told me that he thought I might want to think about it when I get older, to ordination and all that. And so that was interesting. And I graduated from college and went to work for Delta Airlines and moved to Atlanta and was active in church and still with this kind of desire, but it just wasn't the right time. Left Delta, thought about it then, wasn't the right time, went to work in advertising. And it was there, I was in my I was like 33, 34. And really, I was at a church in Atlanta, Episcopal church in Atlanta called Church of the Holy Comforter, where 80% of the congregation lives with severe and persistent mental illness. Before that, been in very conventional churches, sort of standard Episcopal churches. And this was a very unique place. It was a permanent mission of the diocese, supported by the diocese. And it was the first time in my life that I'd been in a church community that I felt like the majority of the people, honestly, were the people Jesus would hang out with. People very on the margins of the culture. I mean, severe mental illness. Many of them were black. Most were poor. They'd exhausted their resources. And the church was not just their spiritual home, but that was their family and their community. And so the 20% of us that worked and, had lives outside that, supported them. It wasn't an outreach project. The church was a community, and I was on the vestry, which is the governing board of the church. I drove the bus to pick people up. And it was that experience there that I really finally kind of came to terms, or really acknowledged the fact that I really want to go to seminary, be ordained in the Episcopal Church, and help other people have experiences of God. Because I as a little kid in nature and in church, and the world felt very alive to me as a kid with the Spirit. And so I went off to seminary at 36, went to Austin for seminary, which was a great experience for 3 years. Came back, was ordained in Atlanta, served a parish there for 3 years, and then moved to Seattle for 8 years, and that's where I was when I saw an ad for a psilocybin study at Johns Hopkins. So that was in 2016. So 10 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the cliff notes to my path to ordination, and I'm really glad I did that. I'm really glad I did that.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine. His brother was kind of a similar journey from an age standpoint to when he decided to become an Episcopal priest, and he went to seminary right next door to where my eldest daughter's at school. So she's at Episcopal High School in Alexandria, and there's a beautiful seminary right there. And so that was his start was he was a male model, and then a yoga teacher, and then decided to become Episcopal priest.
Excellent. Oh, excellent. Oh my God.
He's a good-looking priest.
Yeah,
good-looking priest.
Good. Yeah. Maybe I want to at some point let's flag the yoga thing, because that's kind of part of my own interest in psychedelics, which sounds like a tangent, but there is a connection to that. Sort of the church missing opportunities to engage the culture, where the spiritual desires of the culture. And yoga to me represents that, which is a more embodied spirituality. And there's still some Christian denominations that don't think Christians should be doing yoga, which is ridiculous. But there was a real slow adapting to that. And when I was in Seattle, I would drive to church on Sunday morning. There'd be people with their yoga mats going off to yoga class. And I just wondered, why can't we be doing this in church parish halls? And I would say that about holotropic breathwork or sound baths. I mean, there's so much out there. There's such a beautiful offerings of spiritual tools and resources, including psychedelics, but it doesn't even have to be psychedelics. And the institutional religion is mostly missing it. So. Yeah,
and it was interesting about yoga. It came up not too long ago in the church that I attend here in Charleston, and it was in one of the sermons. It was this kind of debate that around certain things of like, as a Christian, should you do this or not do this? And then one of them was yoga, and I think generally most of the congregation was in favor of yoga, but and there was also tattoos was another one that came up, and we have a very big. We're very well known for our worship music. I go to Seacoast, which I'm sure you're familiar with Seacoast, and Brandon Lake comes out of Seacoast, and said, well, if there was a problem with tattoos, the whole worship team would be basically gone. So, but yeah, it's interesting how we have these kind of debates, and I always look at it and say, well, if God is all things and in everything, it's in my view, it's like these things are all we have access to it all. Right.
And really, in everything that's going on in the world, we're going to fixate on tattoos. That's really where we're going to. That's the line in the sand. We're going to about our. And that's sort of the problem with picking and choosing scripture. Is that you can find something in scripture that says don't, mutilate your body or something. There's something in there about that somewhere buried in Leviticus somewhere. But my God, really?
Yeah, I remember
I'm
first
glad
time. Yeah. The first time I read the Old Testament. I was like, wow, there's a lot in here. And so you could definitely pick and choose pieces of scripture to defend, whatever point of view you want. But,
whatever axe you want to grind, you can find something in scripture to back it up.
Yeah, well, we have no opposition to tattoos on this on this podcast. Josh is in the lead. I'm way behind. I've got a little one, but yeah, it's that's beautiful.
I'm sorry you're going to burn in hell, but I'm glad.
Well, Hunt, I would love to put a pin and emphasize this point of resistance. Mm-hmm. I know your primary faith is rooted in Christianity, but studying up on you're a practitioner of many different faiths, and Travis and myself, I think, would relate to that as well. I remember reading Autobiography of a Yogi for the first time, and how it tied in all the world's religions, and it made it all make perfect sense, that it was all pointing to the same thing. And yet we find ourselves kind of segregated in these different silos, and maybe that's just human nature. But what do you think about people who live either a religious life or a faith-based life and experience resistance to trying new things, or learning new things, whether it's yoga or breath work, or I know we're going to get into psychedelic use, but what do you think it is about humans and resistance?
I think it's fear. I mean, there's so, it all comes down to fear, and I think we'll just talk about institutional Christianity. Part of it is, I think, on the part of the leaders, is the fear that people will leave the fold, or it depends on how narrow the interpretation of Scripture is and how narrow the understanding of what it means to be a Christian is. The more narrow it is, the less interested and open people are to other experiences of God or other practices. I heard somebody say this not long ago. I wish I could remember who it was. Said, Christianity is my primary residence, but I have homes in other places. And I mean, Buddhism is really important. Christianity is my home, and there's no shaking it. For me, it's the path. But Judaism, of course, has been influential. Buddhism's been influential to me. Hinduism a little bit. Native American spirituality, and certainly with psychedelics. But there's nothing in any of that has shaken my own desire and commitment to following the way of Jesus. Nothing in that. And I don't think Jesus what we know of Jesus would be in opposition to any wisdom that comes from anywhere else. Richard Rohr, the Franciscan priest, says if it's true in one place, it's true everywhere. So if something's true in Buddhism, then it's going to be true in Christianity. We may have different language for it. We may not exactly line up on the dogma or the doctrine, and it was Thich Nhat Hanh, a Buddhist monk, has a book called Living Buddha, Living Christ. And I was in my 20s, living in Atlanta, going to church, but something was missing. And now I know it was contemplative spirituality. But I started reading Hindu texts and read Thich Nhat Hanh. And in that book, he says, this is in every tradition, this contemplative, mystical stuff is in every tradition. And if you can find it in your native tradition, go there. If not, then yes, look in other places, try other things. But that sent me right back to Christianity, and really reading the mystics, and seeing Paul as a mystic, not as a hard ass lawgiver, but you read Paul's experiences of the risen Christ, road to Damascus, the heavens, the third heaven. It's he may not have eaten a mushroom, but it sure sounds like he did. So. So really it's not about psychedelics, it's about the mystical experience. And all religions at their core are a manifestation of an inexplicable experience of God that then gets told in story, and then systems get built around it. And I think the experiences of the risen Christ after the crucifixion, whatever that was, people had those experiences, and that led to this explosive growth of this new fringe religion, this fringe sect in Judaism that became a major world religion really quickly. But it was those experiences that it wasn't doctrine, it was the experiences of God that led people to live alternative lifestyles, holding everything in common, all the things that we in Acts, all that the presence of the Spirit, Pentecost, they were all together in one place. The Spirit comes, and then it explodes this religion out into the ancient Near East and around the globe. So, at the core of the world's religions is these experiences of the mystery of the divine, of God, and I think sadly in much of Christianity, American Western Christianity, it's sort of not there. Pentecostalism has it. You occasionally get it, but we don't trust it. And that's the institution's fault, I think. So,
yeah.
That was a long.
Yeah, I think you're.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, I love it, and I think you're spot on. Like that, it all starts with fear and fear of the unknown. And I think what I really heard you say in all that is if we grip too tightly to our doctrines and our dogmas, we're only going to not only, but it's going to lead to resistance and a really like narrow way of viewing not only life in the world, but also the divine.
Right.
If we could just like soften and be a little bit more open and give ourselves permission to explore, then we realize like the resistance and the gripping of dogma and doctrine is really not serving us,
No,
you know?
no, exactly. And all of these experiences that we can talk about, including my study of other religions, my friends that are Muslim or Jewish or Buddhist, those relationships have made me a better follower of Jesus. It's not. I'm not ready. I don't want to give it up. It's my path. So, but I want it. I want to enrich it as much as I can. And I want other people to feel the freedom to do that. Yeah. So yeah, and it just things get stuck and rigid, and I don't want Christianity should not be a corpse. It's it needs to be a living, breathing, expanding way to live, and to lock it down to the first century or the 1950s or to lock it down to a particular time is not at all what I think Jesus intended. I don't think so. First of all, he didn't intend to start another religion. He just wanted to make his own better.
Right. Yeah, that's what's always interesting about when you read about Paul as well, is like Paul didn't stop being Jewish.
Right.
Right. I mean, listen,
It took a couple centuries for the Christian sect to begin to separate from its larger Jewish context. I mean, none of that stuff happened overnight, and yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's where we lose. And I know Travis has gone down the Christian mysticism path and done a lot of reading and research and just kind of sitting with that. And I think it's what's interesting in our conversations over the years has been, we kind of, and to your point, is we've lost the connection to this core piece of the original Christian experience, right? And and trying to kind of bring people back to that is a really core kind of part of this kind of walk in faith and experience. And I think that's where like psychedelics, can really kind of be a really effective activator,
yes.
Right? To bring people to that experience. And so I guess maybe just is a good opportunity to kind of dive into your experience with the Hopkins study, and maybe just for maybe some of our listeners who aren't familiar with maybe some of the background, it was really kind of replicating the Good Friday study that was, or experiment that happened, a number of decades ago. But maybe just kind of walk us through kind of how it all came about, and then it's a fascinating story. So
yeah,
sure
thank you. I'll try to keep it tight. But so it was the fall of 2015, and I was living in Seattle. I was the senior pastor rector of an Episcopal church on Mercer Island, and I was at home on a weekday afternoon. I think it was probably raining and kind of cloudy in Seattle in October, and I was flipping through Christian Century, which is then it was every other week, but it's monthly now, sort of progressive Protestant magazine, the Christian Century. And at the back was an ad for a study at Johns Hopkins. They were looking for religious professionals of all traditions who had not ever done psychedelics. They were realizing in their research that the people that were having the best results with depression, PTSD, addiction, whatever the condition was, those that were having the best results were having mystical, religious, and or spiritual experiences. So they brought us in not as a mental health study, but to use that protocol on people that were trained in Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism. I think that's the four religions. And I think there were 28 of us or 30 of us, and it took a long time to fill it out. But anyway, so I saw the ad. I thought, well, there's no way I'm going to get in because it's going to fill up like that. Who wouldn't want to do this? Johns Hopkins. And I applied and went to Baltimore and passed all the screens and got in, and it took maybe 6 years to fill it up. It wasn't a high priority there, and they were just having trouble finding people to be in it. This was before Michael Pollan's book. I think it'd fill up like that now. I know it would. But anyway, so I was so lucky. I'd read Pollan's article in the New Yorker about the about the research, but had kind of forgotten about it. And just so excited to be, because I cared about mental health. I understood the relationship between mental health and spiritual health because of that church I'd been a part of in Atlanta. And I was just so excited. So I went to Hopkins, and I was accepted in December of 15. Early February of 16, I was there with the whole team, Roland Griffiths and Bill Richards and Mary Casamano. Just couldn't. Now I just can't believe my good fortune. I didn't know who they were then. And 2 experiences: medium high dose of psilocybin with 2 guides a month apart. And the first experience was very Pentecostal. If you know anything about the Episcopal Church, we're pretty buttoned down. There's not a whole lot of room for the Holy Spirit. And I had about an hour and a half in, began to have a very embodied, dramatic, physical, electrified body, Kundalini awakening experience. Words I didn't really know anything about. And upon reflection, I realized for me as a Christian, that is the Holy Spirit. It's the energy in our bodies that's bringing us together right now, that's holding the world together, that's moving us forward. And it was a profound experience. And a month later, I'm back, and not really sure what was going to come. I didn't know if I'd have that same kind of dramatic experience. And I did. It was different. It was really about my ordination to the priesthood. The second one was about this kind of expansion of that. It's not an ego thing, but in the experience, I just felt myself being ordained out beyond the church, is how I would say it now. And then I sat on that for 5 years. I mean, I didn't have anybody to talk to. I had one friend that was in the study. I talked to my then wife. But it was kind of fringe in 16 still, at least in the circles I was traveling with. Although even a lot of my friends, I'd been around mushrooms and LSD, I'd never done it. Not because I had any judgment, I just didn't feel any interest in it. And sat on that for 5 years, and then realized it's in the middle of COVID that there needed to be a place for Christians to learn about psychedelics, and a place for the psychedelic community to learn about mystical contemplative Christianity, kind of not what they're seeing Christianity portrayed in the media or even how it's lived out in much of America, but this deep, rich tradition that goes all the way back to Paul, but includes St. Francis and St. Clare and Thomas Merton and Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, Dorothy Day. this whole long list of Christian mystics. So bringing that into awareness of the psychedelic community, not necessarily for them to become Christian, but they want to, but to say there's this whole beautiful tradition in Western Christianity that would be helpful for understanding these non-ordinary states of consciousness that come up in psychedelics. So that was the journey to Ligare, which was 5 years ago. I started that, which is a educational nonprofit and a pastoral and spiritual care nonprofit for Christians and others that are interested in psychedelics and non-ordinary states of consciousness. Primarily around risk reduction, trying to keep people safe. We don't offer ceremonies, but we help people that are having those experiences understand them in a Christian context. So that's the journey. But that first experience, and it's the second chapter of Acts is the original Pentecost story. If you go back to that, they're all these followers of Jesus are all together in one place. Tongues of flames, the wind blows in, and that to me,
tongues,
speaking in tongues, which I think that was kind of the experience I had of this sounds coming out of my mouth. So in that first session, and interestingly, Gordon Wasson, mycologist who met Maria Sabina, who really brought mushrooms and psilocybin back to the West. His father was an Episcopal priest, and he described his first experience with, and this is much later that I read this and knew about this, but he described his first experience with Maria Sabina as a Pentecost. He said it was like the first Pentecost, and I read that only a couple years ago. So that was a firm affirmation of my experience, actually. And Gordon Wasson, the religious spiritual part of him does not ever get mentioned, but his father was a very liberal, open-minded Episcopal priest who helped his son really understand Scripture in a very advanced way. So Gordon Wasson was both an important figure in psychedelics, but also I think really made the connection with Christianity. So, as Maria Sabina was Christian, she was very devout and practicing Catholic. Her bishop knew all about her mushroom work. So the fact that there's some Christians have their hair on fire about psychedelics, we should be concerned. We should make sure people are safe. These, as you all know, powerful, but we don't have to be afraid of them. And back to Josh's question about fear, we just need to be respectful. And some people shouldn't do it, and not everyone should do it. But it's a mushroom, for God's sake.
That'll be the tagline of this episode.
Yeah, it's a mushroom.
A mushroom.
For God's sake.
Love it.
Yeah, and it's powerful. I mean, I'm not saying it's powerful, and do it in the right way, and make sure you're with somebody that you can trust. And don't do it if you've got some severe mental health, like if you're bipolar or schizophrenic. Please don't do it until we do more research. But yeah, anyway.
Have you found Hunt has, and I would assume kind of as, awareness for psychedelics has become more mainstream, right? And more kind of, I think, broadly accepted. What parts of the church do you see kind of most open, and is there still, and is it do you, I guess, Christianity is obviously a global religion, right? I mean, so some of I think the biggest churches are actually in South Korea. I was doing a little research the other day, which said hundreds of thousands, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And so do you think in terms of the openness to and we could talk psychedelics, just the kind of more mystical experience or connection to Christ do you see that being more open in certain parts of the world or certain denominations of Christianity than others?
Yeah, as a friend of mine says, and I really do think this is true, there are many, many Christianities. I mean, there are
tons.
Yeah, and it's not just, it's more than just like it. There's divergent expressions of Christianity, which if we can calm down, we can be accepting of each other, then that's a beautiful thing. The problem is each part of that thinks the other one's wrong in many cases. But if there could be a kind of relaxed attitude toward each other, that could be the diversity of that could be a beautiful thing. But I would say there are. So here's what I'm discovering is if you think about hierarchies in church, lay people. Some clergy, the higher up in the hierarchy, the more anxiety there is about psychedelics. There are lots of people that I know that went to seminary because of psychedelics, that are coming back to Christianity because of psychedelics, finding Christianity, having experiences of Mary Magdalene. I mean, kind of minor, she's not minor, but like that's kind of, Mary Magdalene is not the first person people think about when they think about Christianity. And people are having experiences of her in psychedelic journeys. And, I just want the church to be available to people who are having those experiences and want to learn more. And we're getting there, but the higher up the hierarchical ladder, the more anxiety there is about it. And there's a lot of pressure in American Christianity and European Christianity because of declining numbers and polarization, and religious leaders are under a lot of pressure right now. And so I don't really criticize them, but there's a real ministry for the church in this, both in the pastoral care, in chaplaincy, in the research, and mental health. Like, mental health needs a religious voice and religious pathways to that and back and forth to that. So I feel like if the church could relax about the drug part, because we don't seem to mind taking penicillin, we don't seem to mind taking antidepressants. Many Christians don't mind doing that. So I don't know. Again, it's just a mushroom. Alcohol is much more dangerous. So, there's just a lot of, we've had 50 years of the war on drugs and Nancy Reagan and just all of that. So it's laid a heavy cultural weight on it, and that's beginning to come undone because people are becoming aware of the research, and there's a desperation in the culture for new ways to deal with these mental health issues, which are really just canaries in the coal mine for the problems that are happening in the culture. I mean, teenage depression should be a wake-up call. Teenage suicide should be a wake-up call for all of us. Like, what in the hell is wrong that we have teenagers that are killing themselves? That's on us. And how can we be better humans so that children don't feel such despair? And maybe having experiences of God so that we can begin to love each other and not be afraid of each other, whether we're Christian, Jewish, Muslim, nothing, whatever we are. Just we're all from the same place.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I just want to say, Hunt, that thank you. I feel an immense sense of gratitude for you having the courage to sign up and take the leap, because you're definitely a bridge for many, many people. And I can see that very clearly because I can see it through my own eyes and my own experience. And I think it's just amazing that, in the timeline of the psychedelic renaissance and the research and everything, that you got to meet at one of the most important intersections that really could possibly exist in our modern Western culture. And I think that's just really incredible. My daughter Piper, who was diagnosed with cystic fibrosis when she was 4, I like to share this story because in the history of cystic fibrosis, this rare disease that has been around for tens of thousands of years, maybe longer, that on her timeline, she was really sick all the way and right up until she was 12 years old. And the month that the FDA approved a new drug therapy for 12-year-olds and up, she turned 12 and she started that drug, and it changed her life. And it, to me, is like just miraculous timing, right? The divine timing of that. And so, I just want to commend you and cheer you on. And I just love that we're having this conversation and this opportunity. And in reflection of what you shared from your experiences, and I've read the Michael Pollan book, How to Change Your Mind, and this idea of a complete mystical experience. Like, there's two things I've noticed, and my daughter Piper's diagnosis with cystic fibrosis is without a doubt what triggered me to want to explore life deeper and further, right? I felt broken, I felt disconnected from God, and I felt like I needed to heal, and I wanted to better understand health and what that meant for her and be a better father. And that led me to my first few journeys with psychedelics in different plant medicine traditions, different cultural traditions. And a couple things I've noticed over those years. One is that it seems like a human is like if you think about a human as like a 2-liter bottle of soda, and this is a very basic example, but when they keep everything inside and they get shaken up, it's like their whole system is pressurized and their nervous system is condensing all of this trauma and information deep in their body and their cells and their nervous system. And what it's like when you take a psychedelic that opens neurological pathways that allow for a little bit of a depressurization, right? Like take a little pressure off the system, and it starts to release. That in my understanding is the beginning of a process of purification. And in like Christian mysticism and theosis, in union with God, you have purification, illumination, and glorification. And it's like you don't have to use psychedelics to go through purification. You could use breathwork. You could use so many different modalities and tools. But it is just this idea that we grow up in these environments and families, and we have all of these different pressures and traumas and things that occur. And it gives us this opportunity to relieve some of that pressure out of the system. And that energy starts to flow and move through us, and it opens up that circuitry, so then we can start to begin to feel again and feel ourselves and feel this connection to ourselves and others, that it's like a prerequisite that we aren't containing all that energy inside of ourselves, so that we can feel the world and the experience around us.
beautiful. I'm gonna steal that analogy. The 2 liter bottle of Coke is a really spot on. And I think that both individually, I think that's maybe, I don't know if the 20th century, 21st century is worse, but if you think about the last 40 years, the pressure, maybe beginning with 9/11 or maybe Vietnam, I don't know where it begins, but we've just been in this increasingly pressurized, shaken, and we're in the middle of it. I mean, we're in I hope the peak of it, but we're in this the pressure gets released in terrible, unhealthy, destructive ways. And so thank you for that, because I really do think that's right. And so when I was in that study at Hopkins, I was seeing a therapist because, we were kind of required to, but I was seeing a therapist just to stay healthy and was dealing with some pretty serious anxiety. In fact, he coded me with anxiety disorders. So I thought, so the insurance would pay. That's really what I thought. I was like, I'm fine. But my then wife was very seriously ill with a really serious thing. We had a 12-year-old son who was doing fine, but pressure of that. We were 3,000 miles from home. Work was stressful. I showed up at Hopkins ready for that experience and had a beautiful experience. And the next day, I was sitting in the hotel restaurant writing my report to read to the team. And I was like, what the hell? This knot of anxiety was gone. I mean, I always say it came back because of life, but now I have such a different relationship with it. It was like this thing that was just, I could not relax. And I think it was that pressure, it was that powder keg thing and after that first experience, it opened up. I ended up moving to Savannah for a job, but not because I realized I was like 8 years. It was great. We did good work together in Seattle, and it was time for us to come back to the Southeast. And my son was about to go off to college. So, but I had such clarity, and I think I know I didn't have the clarity because the anxiety and the pressure in my body was killing me. And I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it seems like, when people have the opportunity to release that, and from what I understand from studying yogic science, it's like there's the lower nervous system and the upper nervous system. And when we move that energy up through the nervous system, it allows it to transmute, because like the heart is a pump, it's a vortex, right? When we can bring it through the throat chakra and speak it, and these opportunities allow us to clear the system, and that purification is what I think opens up the sensory input to the more interconnected world. And then the second thing I wanted to mention was the other thing I've seen over the years is that is always occurring, no matter what the medicine is. Some plant medicines may be different. It's like if you go drink an ayahuasca tea, that's like just ripping the lid off the 2-liter bottle, whereas like psilocybin can be a very gentle experience. It can be very strong and powerful, but there's kind of a moderation to the throttle on how you unleash the energy from the subconscious. And then the second thing I've noticed is that complete mystical experience, whatever it is, if someone has it, it changes them forever. It's like there's a transmutation in their consciousness. If they slip into any kind of non-dual perception, even just, I'll never forget the first time my daughter and I sat in ceremony together. We were sitting by the fire, and somebody had come in, and psilocybin was the tool we were using, and somebody came in and got me and brought me outside, and I laid down next to her, and she asked me a few questions, and she said, "Why are people so unhappy?" And we were laying there by the fire looking up at the stars and holding hands. And then she said, "Why do I care so much about my boyfriend?" and we were just laying there. I didn't say anything. And then so I just put my hand up. And when I put my hand up, I was holding, and you're in the firelight, so that ambient light, right? And then she put her hand up, and I said, let's put our hands close together. And we put our hands close together, and all of a sudden, she could see the magnetic resonance in the energy around and between our hands. And as soon as she saw it, she gasped. She went, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, I can see it, I can see it, I can see it, I can see it. And she could just see just the energy between our hands. But it was so powerful and so profound because it took her out of that normal perception of separation. And it opened just the slightest opening for her to see there was nothing between us. There was this incredible, powerful energy connecting us. And you see that in these different traditions of like energy work, like Qigong or Tai Chi, or, you know, you're always practicing this idea of the formless or the immaterial energy, and not so much focused on the density of the form and the clunkiness of the separation. And so I just wanted to share that because it sounds like I had never heard of the Pentecostal experience in relationship to scripture in the Bible. But when you're describing that, I was like, man, they were having like non-dual experiences, and they were probably feeling profound shifts of energy flushing through their nervous system, and that can make your body do really crazy things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Go back. I mean, it's worth going back to read through the lens of kind of psychedelic experience, just to see because I think, it's all energy. The tongues of flames. First of all, the wind blows in, and then the tongues of flames, and then their response is these prayers, is what we call, speaking in tongues, which is just an energetic response from inside the body to release that energy, I think. So, yeah, it's all there.
Then you read Revelation, and you're like, oh,
the whole book.
Yeah, you're like,
that whole
okay.
thing is right. Yeah,
It's like I feel like I've been here.
Well, and that might be the most important word, Matti, right? Revelation. It's like what was revealed to you, Hunt, in those experiences has profoundly changed your trajectory, and it's like we're in a living revelation, and that's where I feel like Christ becomes the most alive in my life is when I'm in that awareness of his presence, and I'm not seeking anything, and it's more like to be in a clear channel, and that energy is coming through and flooding. What I feel like is his energy and light comes through and just floods the field. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, and the whole idea, a lot of Christianity has a misunderstanding of what the word apocalypse or apocalyptic means. It really just means a revealing. It's not into the, it's not what is generally portrayed in like Left Behind books and things. The word means a revealing, and like to me, like COVID was an opportunity, was an apocalypse, not in the end of the world, although it felt like it's in us, but it was a revealing of so many things, and we probably missed most of the messaging on that, but the interconnectedness of the whole world, that something like a virus can spread. There was so much how dependent we are on each other, how hard it is to be isolated. There was so much that we learned in some ways, but the book of Revelation is an apocalyptic text that shows really the destructive power of empire. It's really about the Roman Empire. And that would be an important, an important lesson always for humans to see what's revealed in that, what it says about power and how it's used and misused. So, and the idea that there's the idea of revelation is exactly right. So, and the revelation happens all the time. The Spirit still moves. Just like that, what you and your daughter experience. Those are manifestations of the Spirit, I think we would say in Christian language and theology. And again, we don't have to be afraid of it.
Hunt, with one of in some of our previous conversations, we've talked about kind of some of the challenges that clergy faces. Like any other profession with burnout and maybe dissatisfaction with their vocation, and obviously, if the clergy is burnt out and isn't feeling the full vibrancy of the Spirit, right, that's going to make it hard for the congregation to feel it as well, right? So from your experience in the study, what was the impact that had, I mean, for you personally, in terms of connection to vocation, but maybe talk about some of the other participants in the study, because I think what's fascinating is it really was from a wide, and you mentioned earlier, wide variety of wisdom traditions.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Some which are more connected to mysticism and open to this than others. But how did you see that in terms of people really then feeling more directly connected to vocation, to God, and how that then led to bringing that to their congregations post-study?
Well, and I'll speak to myself, and I have some data for everybody else. But for me, I didn't realize how burned. I talked about the anxiety, but I was burned out, and there'd been a lot of conflict early on in my time there, and I was just worn out, and was learning how to steam, and those two experiences just completely re-energized my ministry, my whole life. But I felt like, again, I got back to the place where I was when I first decided to do it, go to seminary and be ordained. I had these profound experiences of God, and I wanted other people to have them. And what I realized when I got back to Seattle eventually was, and I've done what I can do here. And I had led a pilgrimage to Israel and Palestine with members of the congregation, and some relationships had gotten repaired. And I had such clarity. I had real clarity about, and this friend sent me the profile of this church here in Savannah, where I live now, and it just felt like the perfect match. And I knew, and this is not my norm. I knew that if I put in for it, sent my materials, I would get it, which is not normally how I respond. And so I checked with my son and to see if he was ready to move back to the Southeast, and he was. So I had such clarity that I'd lost in all of my anxiety about growing church and making everybody happy, and dealing with all the politics of church had burned me out. And so in the study, and those results got published, it was involved in some controversy, so it didn't get it really, and it'll eventually come back around because the results are really important. But of the 28 of us, I think this is true. If not every one of us, then the 99% of us both had a dramatic decrease in our sense of burnout, a much deeper appreciation of our own tradition and our own ministry or work, and then this appreciation of the other traditions that we didn't know each other, but in many of those experiences people had, if they were Christian, they had some sort of encounter with Judaism or Islam. I had an encounter with both Islam and Judaism in my two first journeys, both as a prayer practice and then some imagery from felt like tiles in a mosque. It's kind of the sacred geometry that I was seeing, because I'd been in mosques and other places. So, but the burnout was dramatically decreased, and an appreciation of our own tradition and our own work as either clergy or chaplains was like off the charts. It hugely, and I would say all of us now, and we're all in touch. Not all of us, but most of us are in touch, and people have re-energize their ministry. Some people have started nonprofits like I have. Some people have gone back and gotten their counseling license and are now doing ketamine or other, want to do MDMA therapy. People have written books. People are writing books. The New Testament scholar's teaches at SMU in Dallas, and her name's Jamie Clark Soul. She's got a new book coming out in the next few months. Psychedelics and Soul Care, What Christians Need to Know. She's a serious John scholar, serious New Testament scholar, and was in the study. And there's just incredible things coming out of that little group of people. And then, here we are, four of us talking about Christianity and psychedelics. So, can they coexist? They already do. So,
yeah.
So
I always say,
sorry if people don't think they should coexist, because they already do.
Yeah, I get a number of and living in the South, obviously very deep, foundation in Christianity, which is beautiful. But I get a lot of my friends who are Christians who are open and interested and kind of fascinated by psychedelics, but are a little bit worried about, well, am I going to somehow have a psychedelic experience and then I'm no longer going to believe in God? And I was like, I always say that the biggest risk I always see for is for atheists coming into a psychedelic experience, because I'm pretty sure you're gonna have a direct experience with God, and it's gonna be profound. And to Travis's point, it like sticks with you, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's why it's so. In my own experience, it's been so transformative in just having that, and it really, for me, I mean, I've always, been a Christian, but it's really been since my experience with plant medicine that has really come to kind of the core, right? And it's because it's of the direct experience, right?
Yeah.
And so you experience that, you sit with that, and you really then can have a relationship and a conversation with God and with Christ. It's hard not to be transformed by that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And if I may also share like my personal experience with this, because, talking about burnout, really that's where, I turned to plant medicine for the first time. Here I was 6 years into my journey as a corporate bankruptcy lawyer and on partnership track. And I was trying to do all the things that I was told to do in order to be quote unquote successful in this life. And I just found myself in a place where I was burnt out. I was living with subtle depression. I was waking up at 3 a.m. very anxious. I was also dealing with a little bit of imposter syndrome, like, around 30 years old, and just like, who am I? And then the other thing is, like, I was also sober for the first 30 years of my life, right? Growing up with a father who suffered with alcoholism, I threw everything out the window with that. So I had never touched alcohol or marijuana, certainly never psychedelics. And here I was finding myself burnt out at 30 as a young professional, where on the exterior, everything looked amazing, but on the inside, I was dying. Yeah. And, I thankfully, had the permission and the resources to take a sabbatical. And I'll never forget it because it's just so life-changing. I wrapped up, I wrapped up where I was in my firm on a Friday. That Thursday night prior, I did my first holotropic breathwork session. It was a small men's group. Travis was there. I blew the top off, and I was able to release so much energy. Wrapped up work on Friday, and then Saturday I sat in my very first plant medicine ceremony. It was a small group of men. Travis was there as well. And I just couldn't believe the peace that I felt. And in retrospect, it was a very low dose of psilocybin. It was a very gentle evening, but it was exactly what I needed for my first experience with any sort of mind-altering substance. Sitting outside in nature, and I couldn't believe, it's so life-changing, going from being stone cold sober, having an aversion to anything altering the mind. And then also, this wasn't my reason to get into psychedelic medicine work, but, growing up Catholic, and that did a number on me. And I had an aversion to, I knew I was spiritual. I had certain spiritual practices and textures, but I was just kind of floating. I certainly didn't have any identification with a faith. And I had an aversion to admitting, I had an aversion to even saying the word God, let alone saying I believed in God. Right. And then what I found, and, through my journey, not on that very first psilocybin experience, but, several ceremonies down the road, there was the healing effect of all of this. We've been talking about it, the energetic embodied experiences that we can experience under these plant medicines, and how healing that could be, not just to flush the system and release stagnant energy and create new space within, but for me, being able to reclaim my belief in God. And to feel God not only in me, but in my brothers and sisters, in nature, and realizing that we are God, right? Which I know can be a bit confrontational for, some people, but I don't think I would have had such a healing, profound experience if it was not for sitting in a plant medicine ceremony.
Yeah. And everyone needs a different. I mean, we're all different, and we need different ways to do this. I think the gentle on ramp, I think, is a much better kind of the way the legalities are now, and the way the system's set up. If you're going to commit to go to Jamaica or Portland, and you're going to spend several $1,000s, you're not going to want to just do a little. It just doesn't feel very efficient to go do a little on ramp. People want to go have a big experience, but which is fine, which is good. That was my first introduction, was a big experience. But what would it be like if we gave people little gentle on ramps to it, so that they could get used to the experience and not necessarily blast off? And since that time, I've done a lot of work with psychedelics since those first 2 sessions, and I think it's the heroic dose. There's not a lot you come back from. I mean, they have their own. There's a huge release. Back to Travis's sense of the 2-liter bottle of Coke that exploded. I probably needed it, but it's also, there's something to be said for a gentle on ramp, so that you can get a relationship with it, with the tool, with the substance, and not necessarily be blown out into the cosmos with it. Yeah. So
I think breathwork too. I mean, to Josh's point, though. Yeah, I mean, I would say holotropic can be blown out into the ether, but that's what I often recommend to people who are a bit resistant, right? It's just like, listen, there's amazing experiences. I mean, really, my first direct experience where I was sitting with Christ was during a holotropic breathwork session, and the wild part of that was I remember it was a facilitated experience. There was a number of people in there. When it ended, I could not move for at least 45 minutes. I was sitting in just pulsating with energy, but sitting with Christ the whole time, who was basically sitting there holding my hand while I was and eventually, everyone else dispersed. They let me do my thing, and then I came out of it, and I was like, that was. And before that, I'd had some experience with plant medicine. And I was like, that was a bigger experience than I've even ever had with plant medicine up to that point. But I always say, it's like with these things, whether it's different types of plant medicine or different modalities. I mean, varied things you can do with energy work, with music, with sound. We have access to a tool chest.
Yeah.
Right. And not every tool is going to be right for is perfect for each job, and not every tool is going to be perfect for each individual. No. Right. But as we open up in our awareness of the tools that we do have at our disposal, that God has provided us, right, then a lot of amazing things and transformation can happen, and it doesn't have to be scary for people. No. Right. And there can be gentle on ramps. And it's the same thing as a lot of people come to me like, hey, I'm interested in psychedelics. I'm going to go down to the jungle and sit with ayahuasca. And I'm like, okay, well, that's great. But you don't have to jump in the deep end immediately in the jungle in Peru. Right. But a lot of people aren't aware, right? People are, this is stuff that's just now coming into a lot of people's awareness, right? And so there's still a lot of the education associated with that. And I think that's one of the things that I've been impressed as I've learned more about what you're doing with Ligare over the last couple of years. It's really that education piece, right? And making sure it's not just, hey, here, eat this.
Right. No,
it's like let's create the container that really that supports people in this journey, and make sure that the education is there to do it the right way.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that came out of that study, at least in my diagnosis of it or understanding, is we were all, you don't have to be clergy to be a really spiritually prepared, but you need to be spiritually prepared if you're going to be clergy. And we'd all both had formal education. I'd done so much meditation retreats and led retreats and chanting. I mean, there are all kinds of spiritual practices that have nothing to do with psychedelics. They're a part of my life already. And I just feel like for me and those of us in the study, the pump was really well primed for a big experience. And we without exception, we all had them. And part of that is it's just preparation. I mean, you don't have to go to seminary to be prepared as a Christian, but there are some things to do. Like let's make sure you have some contemplative practices in place. Let's make sure you're got a fairly good sense of your own understanding of God, like what a Christology and a theology that you don't have it totally fleshed out, but have some sense of your own sense of God, and then be willing to have it tested and changed and opened up. But preparation is really important. And any of the long-term benefits of this are going to come because people have a community and a practice and a set of ways to continue the work without the psychedelic, and maybe a pattern of engaging them in a ritualistic, ceremonial way with people that are trusted. I think small groups of people doing this over years, and maybe church friends, whatever, maybe like where I think we've all done men's work, and that's such an important part of my life with a group of men that we get together twice a year, and it's not just psychedelics, but we're all Christian and we all pray together, some clergy in there, and a wide range of ages, and twice a year, and it's a touchstone for my spiritual life and my own. There's accountability, and we check in once a week and all that. So we all need that. So yeah. We'll get there. I mean, we'll get there, but there's a huge conversation happening. I wish that people at higher levels of institutional Christianity could see, and what's happening. The four of us have all had our own experiences that have brought us closer to a relationship with Jesus and Christianity, broadly understood. A big, broad, open Christianity, which is what, to me, is the Christianity of Jesus. It's open, wide open. So, end of sermon. Sorry. End of my Good Friday sermon.
Keep on preaching.
Let me say a little bit about the Good Friday experiment, because we talked about that, and I didn't say much more about it. But 1962, it was a research project that Timothy Leary was involved with, but they were invited to the chapel at Boston University by Howard Thurman, who was he's dead now, but he was an African-American American Baptist preacher, minister, spiritual director to Martin Luther King. So really the moral conscience of the civil rights movement in the 60s. He wrote several books, important books on mysticism and Christianity. If you're not familiar with him, I really encourage you to look up Howard Thurman. But he invited them to bring the research study there. It was all Protestant seminarians. The Good Friday service, in some traditions, there's a 3-hour service for Good Friday. That was going on upstairs. Howard Thurman was leading that, offering reflections throughout the day. There was music. The seminarians were downstairs. Half got psilocybin mushrooms, half got a placebo. And Houston Smith, all of them went on to do things, but Houston Smith became one of the 20th century's primary scholars of religion. He was a Methodist, ended up being a Methodist minister, but really a scholar of religion. And he said he didn't learn, he affirmed everything. He wrote a book called Cleansing the Doors of Perception, which is from the 60s, important book around psychedelics. But Houston Smith was a very important figure in 20th century Christianity and understood the power of psychedelics for religious people to deepen their own practice. But so the study I was in was a redo of that, both with better science, because it was 50 years later, and also not just Protestant Christians, but Roman Catholics, Orthodox Christians, other Protestants, Buddhists, one Muslim, 4 rabbis. So it was
no Timothy Leary.
No, right. But multi-religious. So, but the Good Friday experiment was, and so this is Christianity and psychedelics. Maria Sabina, who knows what's happened in early Christianity with psychedelics, but in the 20th century, there were multiple Christians talking about this, working with it. A lot of the people involved in the research were Christians. Bill Richards is a Christian, Methodist minister, so now an active Episcopalian. So it's not antithetical to Christianity at all, as we know, but lots of people don't know that.
Yeah. Well, it's when we first met. It was actually after. It was the first time that I've I became aware of who you were was at MAPS about 3 years ago. And I don't think we met actually at MAPS, but maybe it was right after that I had reached out, because you were like a rock star that it was very hard to get close to you. But you were speaking on a panel on...
I was so, oh my God, I stood out in the hallway for 2 hours handing my card out like it.
Oh,
that
God,
was my first kind of big, and I was like, I still have emails I haven't responded to. Like, don't hand your card out at a conference, and you're going to not. Anyway.
Yeah, I decided. So Hunt was speaking on a panel on Christianity and psychedelics, and what was fascinating about that day was there was a series of panels. There was maybe right before you was Judaism and psychedelics.
It was Buddhism.
Buddhism and psychedelics. So it was, really exploring these. These core traditions and how they relate to psychedelics. And, one of the things that what really strikes me is in having traveled throughout the world, and a lot of time also spent in the East, is this relationship that we have with death. Right. And we have a fear and uncomfortability around death in the West that is quite different than in other places. I mean, I spent a summer in Bali once with my family, and there they celebrate it. I mean, it's revered. I mean, it is one big party when someone passed away, because the belief in reincarnation and so they had a much I'd say healthier relationship with death conceptually, which then ultimately allowed them to live more fully in the present.
Yes.
And maybe if you could just speak about that a little bit, and kind of how maybe your experience, in the study and with psychedelics, maybe informed that for you, and then where do you see that kind of where maybe some other wisdom and faith traditions, kind of answer that question of what happens next, maybe better than
Yes,
we do here.
I think that it's fine we're talking about this toward the end, but I think that's probably the most important things for Christians to sort of see in this, both clergy and lay people around, because of the fear of dying. And that's a lot of the research is around that. That wasn't what I was a part of, but this death anxiety, terminal patients. Emory University is doing a lot of research with cancer patients, and death anxiety and fear of dying. And somebody told me, and I think this is true, Christians in general are the most afraid to die, which is tragic, because the core of our tradition is that death is not the final stop. That life is in death, life is changed, not ended, which is a phrase in the Episcopal funeral liturgy. But that whatever happens after this is not it. This is not the end. And yet, I think it's the kind of Christianity that wants to condemn people to hell, that even if people don't believe that, there's still this fear that there's judgment, that there's punishment. And so my connection to that is I spend a lot of time with dying people, and because I think that's one of the most important ministries of the church, is to be present to people when they die. So we have in the Episcopal Church have something like last rites and confession and how to help people unburden. And by and large, the people that I worked with in the parish were afraid to die. There was a lot of unresolved issues in their family. They had, even if the Episcopal Church doesn't talk about hell, there's some fear that there's something, they haven't lived the Christian life. And so if I am a facilitator or practitioner, it's going to be in that space, because I got a lot of satisfaction out of that work, and I know, and I've always believed that there's more to this, more than this mortal realm. And I've always believed that, and now I know it because of my psychedelic experiences. I just know that that time is not linear, that we're coming in and out of stuff all the time. That I think we come back around. I don't know exactly how that happens, but I don't think this is our only chance. I think, and even if it is our only chance at life, I think we return to the source, which is God, and we're all together in this. I just know it in a way that I didn't before, and and just helping people die well could be, if the church found no other ministry with psychedelics except to help people die well, we would be way ahead of the game. And because to your point, Matti, we live better if we. Jesus says it. This is the kingdom of God is here. It's not on a cloud. It's not up on a cloud with Jesus. It's here, now, right now, and we can trust God. We can trust God to work out whatever happens after this. We don't have to be too concerned about it. We just need to live, for Christians, live the most Christ-like life we can live here. And that's not to get some reward. The reward is living that kind of life, a life of compassion and mercy and love and justice, and know that we're loved, know that others have compassion. That's the kingdom of God. And Jesus says, you'll do more, live like I live like Jesus lives, and you'll do more than I've done. I mean, we just put all this stuff on Jesus and say, well, that's Jesus. I can't live like that, so I'm just going to feel miserable and not worthy and be afraid to die and all those things. So, yeah, I may not answered your question, but I think there's such an opportunity for not just Christianity, but the world's religions, the world's wisdom traditions to engage this, to help people live healthier, more whole lives, and to really understand the wisdom that's in these traditions. Christianity is not about judgment; it's about love.
Yeah,
it's about love. Yeah. It's about love. So
yeah, I think there's probably everyone could maybe use a little bit more time reading Scripture, and as a reminder. And the beauty of the New Testament is it's quite short. You can get through it in a relatively.
Mark is the first one and the shortest one, and Jesus is moving like this. He's just always. Yeah. So yeah, if people haven't read the New Testament, start with Mark, and then eventually get to John, which is a lot weirder. But the four Gospels start with Mark. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's very accessible. It's not super complicated. It goes down to kind of the first principles. Love is a big one, and the I say so. Travis has been doing some end of life work as well, and so I don't know if Travis, if you want to share some of what you've discovered recently in that realm. There's a nice connection here on that front between you and Hunt.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel that deep connection to what you spoke of, Hunt, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you more on that. My experience with wow. Yeah. I feel a lot of emotion coming through, in connecting with this and sharing with this, because I have been sitting recently with some friends who are in that transition, and you brought up a word, you said the Holy Comforter. And in some of the readings I've been doing, Jesus is spoken of as the Great Comforter, capital G, capital C, and to bring comfort to people at that stage of life, I think is so valuable. And in what I was shown in a mystical vision, in a ceremony, in the presence of Christ, and what I was what was revealed was that his hand is right there waiting for us, and there is this bridge of light, and we are we have an opportunity to bring that peace and comfort to people at that stage, and it has just as much to do with their nervous system and the release of their spirit from the body, and being guided into that experience and through that experience. And so I think it's a very clear directive for those who hear the call to be with the dying and to support them through that journey. So, for me, it's one of the most important things we can do with people at that stage of life.
and it's not so far removed from our own. I mean, the 20th century created a whole industry around, the whole funeral industry that removed, and the hospital and people dying in hospitals, but it removed us from, like, I was a hospital chaplain, so I was with somebody when they died. And I was 36 or 7 years old. When my mother-in-law died, we had my son, he was 10, in the room. And I was and it was beautiful. We prayed with, it was beautiful. And he's got such a different relationship to death and dying than I did. I was so anxious in my 30s because I'd never been removed. My grandmother died in the hospital. No one was with her. My grandfather died. I wasn't around, that was just what it was. The mid 20th century, there was a real disconnect. And again, that fear of dying is, when you're with people that die, when they're dying, you really don't have to be afraid. I mean, I think you don't. I know you don't, because I'm not. And I've seen how the transition happens, even if it's not going well up until then. If there's all this family, eventually the dying process takes over, and people are. So the near-death experience literature, just our own personal experiences, the sense that we have that people are still with us, just the openness to that. The Halloween is, All Saints Day and Halloween and All Souls Day is a time of year when we know that the living and the dead come close to each other. That comes out of Celtic spirituality, and there's just so much beautiful stuff in the tradition that allows people to be less anxious and less afraid to die. And yet here we are, all scared to death to die. And I'm not ready. I've got still work to do. But if I got a diagnosis, I think I'd be okay. And Roland Griffiths, who was the main researcher at Hopkins, toward the end of he got a terminal cancer diagnosis, and to read about his experience, to hear about it, is beautiful, because he became friends with the cancer, and he was very advanced meditator and had a very advanced spirituality, not Christian, but had some Christian background. So, there was the psychedelics can really help it, but it's the experience of a unitive consciousness that helps it. It's not the mushroom; it's the experience. So
beautiful.
Let's keep going, Travis. I think none of this stuff has to be like putting the clergy. Part of what the church has done is made the clergy the expert. We all are experts, and we all need to claim our own ministry. And claiming a ministry with the death and dying, there may not be anything more important than that. So, claim your ministry.
Yeah, we all have the connection, and people forget about the Holy Spirit, right? There's the Holy Spirit indwelling. In spite
of what's happening in Silicon Valley right now, trying to beat death, I think eventually we're all going to die. So
yes. And I think too. I think we've all had these shared experiences where when you're one of the benefits to having an amazing psychedelic experience is you often experience death, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then rebirth. And if it's an ayahuasca journey, that might happen an infinite amount of times. So
here we are on Good Friday, and going into Good Friday, we need to forget the beauty of this whole season is on Good Friday we don't really know about it. I mean, we do, but like you go into the tomb, we die, and I think Richard Rohr has I quote Richard some, but he has a beautiful way of describing that process of life, death, and resurrection, which is order, disorder, and reorder. That we're living our life, something happens, like the birth of a child with a serious illness, anything that happen in our lives, and it creates this whole disordered death. It creates a death of a part of us. Divorce, had an experience of divorce, resigning my ordination in the Episcopal Church, all these little experiences of death, and then if you're willing to go into the tomb, and you come, and then there's resurrection, and it's not a resuscitation of a dead body; it's a new creation. Jesus was different. It wasn't the same old dude. It wasn't just the body sitting up. They didn't recognize him. Mary didn't recognize him. What that tells us is that he was different, and we are different after we go through these. Travis, thinking about your daughter, or all the things that we go through in our life, we come out on the other side of that as a new creation, and that should happen throughout our whole life. Good Friday and Easter should happen. Well, it does happen, and if we willing to admit to it, people in recovery understand that. People in addiction recovery understand that. So,
beautiful.
Nothing to be afraid of. It might hurt.
But definitely, it might be some pain involved, but
right.
Yeah, that's the benefit of hindsight. You get to look back and be like, oh, that's why that happened. That's what I needed to learn. That's it can be hard when you're in the middle of it, though.
I don't think any woman that's had a baby is like, I want to do that again. But then, after eventually it's like, okay, that wasn't so bad. So,
yeah. Luckily for us as four guys sitting on having a chat as women seem to be willing to go back to the well on that one.
Oh my God, yes. Much more than, yeah. Oh God, yeah. Men, thank God men don't have babies.
Thank God.
For lots of reasons.
God bless women.
It'd be a very short short run.
Yeah, we would not have survived long. Well, with that, and as we kind of wrap up the conversation and land the plane, it's been an amazing conversation.
Oh God, it flew by.
And so blessed to have had you on. Hunt, how would you like people to? Obviously, we don't want you sitting out handing out business cards because then you'll just be slammed with emails. But and outreach. But what's important to leave our audience with? What do you kind of focus on now? Obviously, in building Ligare, how can people interact with you and support your mission?
Okay, excellent. So several things I'm working on. I started Ligare 5 years ago, ligare.org. It's Latin, it means to unite or to bind. It's the root word of religion. Religare is to rebind. It's rebind to God, rebind to each other. So ligare.org was available, so I snatched it. That was my sign from the gods, internet gods. So that's the name of the organization. It's a nonprofit. We have multiple levels of engagement. You sign up for the newsletter is a place to start. So that's been 5 years. We offer spiritual direction. We have a lot of educational resources. It's a community. There's a community of about 200 people that meet regularly online. That's a membership thing, but lots of free resources. So check that out first. I'm involved right now with a research study with ketamine, spiritual care, and end of life. We're just starting that. We got a small grant to do that. I'm working on that, kind of moving into that part of my work. And then I'm really interested also in how to resource therapists and facilitators to understand Christianity, the complications, the diversity of Christianity, so they can be better facilitators, guides, therapists for people that are, whether Christianity was a positive or negative or mixed bag for people, it's still part of who we are if we brought up in a Christian family or community. So, and if we're not dealing with, that's part of the holistic care. So it's just a missing piece of therapy because therapists aren't theologians and shouldn't be, but it's an important part of who people are. So I'm working on a project to get therapists and others trained to understand the diversity of Christianity so they can be better facilitators. So ligare.org is one place. And then for my personal work, huntpriest.com is another place. I've just started that, and that's got a lot of podcasts that I'll put this on and articles I've written and things I've done. So that's another place to learn about a little bit more about what I'm doing personally. But Ligare that's been a huge part of my work and still is. So 2 places. Thank you for that.
Hunt. Yeah, and Hunt, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your time and your wisdom with us and our listeners. I still have so many questions and topics that I'd love to explore with you. One of them being the intersection between, faith and spirituality and sexuality.
Yeah.
Because I know that's an important part of your story as well. So I hope you'll come back.
And let's get
chat with us again.
Get together in real life too. But lots of things to talk about. Yes.
Absolutely. And unless Travis has anything to close with, I would love to make a request in that you close us out with a prayer.
Oh, yeah, I'd be happy to. Travis, did you have anything to?
Good. Just thank you so much. I look forward to continuing the journey together.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Okay. So let's take a couple breaths ourselves, and people that are listening and watching on this, they can do the same thing. Just take a couple breaths. Feel the Spirit moving through. The Spirit's always moving, but notice the Spirit moving in around us and through us. God of hope and courage and love, we give thanks for this incredible life we've been given to live, for the lessons we're allowed to learn. Strengthen us in our own spiritual journeys. Give us the strength we need to accomplish what we are called to do, individually and collectively. Be present to each of us and to our families and circles of friends. Bless us, keep us, hold us this day and always. All this we pray in all the holy names of God and in the name of the risen Christ. Amen.
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 Beautiful.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Hunt. That was amazing, and very excited for round 2 on the podcast, which we will make sure to have happen. And then obviously getting together in person is definitely a near-term priority. So much appreciated for the time today.
Yeah, me too. Thank you all.